So in this video, I want to help teach you 10 top tips to help you with your portrait photography. I've been a portrait photographer for a number of years and I absolutely love doing portrait photography. It's a great way to connect with others, to earn that sort of trust and for people to open up and share their experiences. So it's quite a responsibility to be a portrait photographer, but it's one that I really treasure. So I hope these 10 top tips will help you develop your portrait photography.
Top tip number 1. Put the model at ease.
So tip number 1, the most important thing is that you put that person at ease. So whoever you're photographing, take the time to talk to them, get to know them. I often spend a good few hours with someone before I take a picture, or I've met them a couple of times before I even bring out the camera. So I've already established that level of trust, and trust is key because it's, you know, most people feel intimidated with the camera, and a lot of people that I photographed often don't like to be photographed. So you've got to, you've got to earn that trust and make them feel comfortable with you, and then when you're at that stage, then you can start to think about taking those pictures.
Top tip number 2. Find a relevant background that relates to the individual that you are photographing.
Tip number 2. So you've already got to know that person. So I would say the next stage is to talk to them about what you want to sort of capture in the photo. So a background is really important. And often in my portraits, the background is relevant to that individual. They have a connection with that background. And also be very careful when you select your backgrounds that they're neutral, they're not competing with the model, so they're not too busy, so that your eye doesn't get distracted on what's happening in the background, but it's focused on the person. So again, backgrounds, think about something very simple, something neutral, but you can go for vibrant colours. Often I like to play with colour in my pictures, but it still doesn't distract from the model. It kind of emphasises the model often and their energy and their personality. So really take your time to consider which background and think about the light as well in that background. You don't want to go to a dark, dingy corner as a background. You want to think about something that's going to help illuminate that person.
Top tip number 3. Use a shallow depth of field so the focus is on the model's face and then the background just blurs out.
So when I'm taking my portraits, I use a prime lens, and I use a 50mm lens. Obviously you use what you've got, but if you can get a 50mm prime lens or an 85, those are ideal for portraits because they allow you to open up your aperture to 1.5, and also the actual image quality is that much sharper because it isn't a zoom lens, it's not a kit lens, so it just means the quality of the pictures are much cleaner, sharper, precise. So if you want to get those eyes to pop with detail, a prime lens is the sort of lens that you would need. And I personally like to shoot with a shallow depth of field if I'm doing a close-up portrait, so then the background drops out of focus and the emphasis is very much directed to the foreground with the model.
Top tip number 4. Use a large depth of field. If you want to show more of the background and you want to take more of an environmental portrait like this one, then make sure that the depth of field is large so that you show all the detail. So it helps to tell the story of the individual in the image.
However, if you're doing an environmental portrait where you do want to show the model and the context of the background, and you might want to do a full figure of a model, then I use a large depth of field. So I would then use f16, f22, because I want to show the detail of the background and the model so that they create a narrative collectively together. And that's why it's called an environmental portrait, because it tells a bit more of a story about that person that's in the portrait.
Top tip number 5. Point of focus is on the eyes, so make sure that you direct the point of focus and you take lots of images so that you get those eyes nice and sharp.
The next point is carefully think about your vantage point. Now, very often I like to sort of shoot to the sort of eye level of the model, but you can obviously shoot above the model looking down, or you can be below looking up. So carefully think about that and how that changes the mood of the image. And the other thing which is really key is really thinking about the eyes. I tend to really focus on the eyes, and the eyes say so much. So in some of my poses, I will deliberately ask my models to sort of look up and then to have a sort of aspirational look almost, and then focus on the eyes. Or if I want them to have a bit more of a reflective mood, that's how I feel that's the sort of energy I'm getting from them, then I would ask them to sort of maybe look down and think about a question that I've asked them. So the eyes can say a lot about the model and create a whole different mood and feeling to the pictures.
Top tip number 6. There's no rules. The model doesn't need to look at the camera. So often when the model is looking away or looking up, looking aspirational, those can be some really lovely images. Also, think about where you want the model to look. So the model can look directly at the camera, or the model can look away from the camera, can look over your shoulder, so they're slightly sort of turned slightly to an angle, and then it just feels a bit more natural, so they're in a moment. And so you think about the poses. Do you want hands to be in the photos as well? Because sometimes people might do things with their hands, and that's part of their personality, and they might want to show that. So think about looking at their body language and try and put them at ease as much as you can, and ask them what feels natural to you. What do you feel more comfortable? Obviously, be careful as well wherever you're directing them. Make sure they're not looking straight into the sun as well. So so just be mindful of that, but ask them about how they feel most comfortable. Top tip number 7. Try to capture a reflective moment. So maybe ask your model something, get them thinking about something so they're engaged and connected in that particular moment. So when I'm taking my portraits, I'm very interested in trying to sort of try and capture the essence of that person. So not just the surface, but their energy, their spirit. And what I tend to do is I've informally sort of interview whoever I photograph, and I like to sort of get to know them so they start to open up. So I've asked people questions about their aspirations, an icon, and something about their occupation, or maybe where they live. What does that mean to them? And through those questions, it's got them thinking. So what I would do is ask them, okay, so I've asked you that question about your aspirations, then I want you to think about it. So they're immersed in that moment, and then I'm taking those photos so that they're distracted, they're not so conscious of the camera, and they're in that moment of being reflective. And those can be some of the strongest images, because they feel much more personal, and it feels like I'm actually sort of getting an essence of their spirit. Top tip number 8. Use light to your advantage. So really carefully select where you take the picture of your model, and think about whether you want the sun behind the model or in front of the model.
Okay, the next tip is using light and using the sun to your advantage. So a lot of photographers like to actually place the model in front of the sun, because then you can get a lovely halo with the sun sort of just outlining the model. And as long as you compensate so you get the right exposure for the model, then that can really create a lovely sort of warm atmosphere in the pictures. And think about the different times of the day that you can take your pictures, whether it's early in the morning as the sun is rising, or if it's in the evening and the sun's setting. Both of those, you can get these lovely golden lights that will just lift and elevate the skin tones as well. So those can look really beautiful. So yeah, use light to your advantage.
Top tip number 9. Take plenty of photos. The more photos you've got to choose from, the easier it's going to be to see those key images. And often, in the moment, you might overlook a shot, but when you go home and get a chance to properly look at them on your laptop, then you'll actually see you've got some really strong images. So take lots of photos.
Now, another top tip is that all photographers take lots of images, okay? And that's how we get those results that we're looking for. So don't be afraid to take lots and lots of photos. Often if I'm taking a portrait of someone, I will take at least 200, 300 images. Because when you're taking a portrait, the model will be moving and the eyes will move slightly. So it's all about capturing those subtle details. And then you can start to have a variety of different poses, different positions where the model is looking. And all of that can really help. And I think as long as you've got a breadth of images, then it's easier to find one successful image. So just don't be afraid to take lots and lots of photos. You've got this moment with this person, they're sharing their precious time, so you owe it to them to do a good job. So then the only way of doing that is to ensure that you get that right shot by taking lots of photos.
And finally, top tip number 10. Don't be afraid to reshoot. If you haven't done if your shot doesn't really capture the energy of that person, and be honest with that person and say, really like to take another shoot. So these two portraits here, completely different mood altogether, and here this really captures her vibrant energy. And we took the time to reshoot and we met up, and I feel this picture does so much more justice than the original image. And the same here with this picture as well. And you can see with the hat was sort of covering, putting her face in the shadows quite a bit here, whilst this is much more striking. There's less of a cluttered background too. So seek perfection, make sure that you're happy with your portrait and the person that you're photographing is happy with your portrait. It's all about just, improving and refining your work.
And the last top tip is this. Do not be afraid to reshoot. I've had to take plenty of reshoots, and you think you've got the picture and you go home and you look through all the images and it's just not right. You've spoken to that person, you spent time with that person, and that portrait's just not doing them justice. It's just not reflecting their energy, their personality. So do take another reshoot, because it is, like I said, it's a responsibility, and you want to be happy and you want to know that you've done a good job and that model's happy because you're representing them. So I've taken quite a lot of reshoots, and I'm so glad I have, because some of those reshoots have been my best image. So don't see it as a failure. It's not. It's just that you know that you want to do better and you want to represent them in the best positive light that you can. And the key words that I would like to emphasize in my portraits is that I think I like to promote a real sense of dignity, a sense of strength of character, and I want them to be a celebration of that person. So I try to really show them in a very positive light, and I try to tap into each person's different personalities and bring that through the photo. So I really hope those 10 top tips have helped. So you get out there, put them to use, and good luck with your portrait shoots. Thank you.